Welcome, it's your friendly neighborhood Badger here, and Christmas has come very, very early, or a little bit late, depending on how you look at it. But today we're going to be talking about the Game Balance Manifesto that's come through from GGG 3 days prior to the actual announcement of the league itself, of Siege of the Atlas and the Challenge League Arch Nemesis. The live stream will be happening in just under 3 days, but we have a lot of information to sink our teeth into at the moment, which will probably keep us satisfied for the next 3 days, and that's why I'm releasing this video now, for all of us to discuss what's actually going on in this manifesto. Now, forewarning, there is a lot of text in this manifesto. I'm not going to be reading everything word for word, but it is going to be getting a little bit wordy. I'm going to try and summarize some things and read in full other things. But this is basically a text-to-speech of the manifesto itself, so, you know, put this on in the background, listen through the whole thing, or you can watch my stupid face if you want to. It's up to you. Remember as well, hit that sub button if you're new here. There's a lot of Path of Exile content coming through. So if you are new, if you're getting into the game, if you're returning to Path of Exile, I'm going to be here to be able to help you all. So hit me up in the comments as well, hit that sub button, and ring that bell. All right, let's get right into this Balance Manifesto, because boy, are there a lot of things coming through, and a lot of them not what we expected. Let's jump right in, shall we? Right in front of us, we have the text of the game balance of the Siege of the Atlas expansion. And I'm just going to get going. I'm just going to start talking. I'm going to stop when there's something important for me to talk about. But apart from that, let's just get right into it. In Path of Exile, Siege of the Atlas, we're making a number of balance changes and have prepared this information for you to preview ahead of our official announcement live stream at the end of this week, just under 3 days. The full details of these changes will be available in the patch notes and are still subject to change, but this post should outline our perceived problems with the current balance and our intentions for their solutions. In general, we're focusing on 2 particular archetypes that we feel are the least competitive with other builds during Scourge. These are handcast spell builds and hit-focused bow builds. So, to begin with, player, balance, hit-based spellcasting. The problem is that most hit-based spellcasting builds deal too little damage and have too few defensive and mobility options when compared to alternatives like traps, totems, mines, triggered skills, or damage over time. And this is really true. If you're playing a self-cast build, you're probably using Unleash, and if you're not using Unleash, you're not playing a self-cast build in most cases. You know, that's just doing hit damage and not damage over time or something like that. Ignite, poison, that sort of thing. So there's a bunch of solutions coming through, and we're going to go through them all. I'm going to talk about a couple of things, but most of all, we're just going to be browsing through this. Solutions. Number 1, adjust the hit damage growth of most spells. The majority of spells gained around 45% more damage at gem level 20, resulting in up to 60% more damage by gem level 25. Some spells have received smaller adjustments or no adjustment. These less affected spells are generally those that provide more mobility or supplemental damage through duration mechanics. So you can see in the specific section here, now obviously we're not reading through all of this, but there's a lot of spell gems that have been altered. All of these numbers are buffs. So you can have a look through there and check that out. We will talk about a couple just in a moment though. Secondly, allow casters to obtain more cast speed through the Runic Dagger mod pool, increase some cast speed values, and give rings and amulets additional tiers of cast speed modifiers. So hopefully increasing, you know, cast speed so we can cast a lot more, meaning that our self-casting feels a lot more fluid. It is a little bit of a problem with self-casting that to really make it feel good, you need a ton of cast speed. So hopefully to get to that threshold of it feeling good and being able to move around and then cast more and move and cast and move, hopefully these cast speed changes are enough. I don't think they will be, but maybe they will be enough. Thirdly, give Orb of Storms more damage and a mechanical redesign to solidify it as a great supplemental lightning damage skill. Hopefully, if you're using something like, you know, Lightning Tendrils, which we'll talk about in the next line right here, Orb of Storms is going to be even better to just drop on the boss and deal some supplemental damage there. Maybe you can have it in a 4-link and your main lightning skill in a 6-link, and you can deal, you know, the damage equal to that of an 8-link or something like that. Who knows? So, fourth, give Flame Blast, Lightning Tendrils, and Ice Spear some improvements to make them great skills for dealing high damage against a single target. So for example, let's take Lightning Tendrils that we were just talking about right there. If we go down to L, Lightning Tendrils. It now deals 1 to 4 lightning damage at gem level 1 unchanged, up to 55 to 1052 at gem level 20. previously 37 to 703. So this is close to it's about a 45%, about a 45% increase. But stronger pulses now deal 200% more damage with its ailments, previously 100%. It now has a 100% effectiveness of added damage at all gem levels, previously 65%. So it's a triple buff to something like Lightning Tendrils. This may, I'm not going to say anything that it's definite, but this may mean that Lightning Tendrils is now a legitimately good bossing skill. We'll have to wait and see right there. It is a channel though, so it means you have to stand still for it to happen. So we'll see. Alright, number 5. Improve many skills that rely heavily on unique threshold jewels to enhance their damage and remove or change these jewels. For many such skills, this means granting more damage in exchange for efficient sources of extra projectiles. This includes skills like Freezing Pulse, Frostbolt, Heavy Strike, and Cleave. For damage-focused spells, the result of these changes means that their damage is increased on top of the damage multiplier noted above. So, Threshold Jewels, it's something that hasn't really been implemented that well in Path of Exile, and they're really not doing that well on the changes right here with Threshold Jewels. This is probably the worst changes, in my opinion, to come through with these changes. But if we go down to Threshold Jewels, they're basically just disabling a bunch of jewels. For example, the First Snow, Frozen Trail, Growing Agony, Overwhelming Odds, basically, you know, a bunch of threshold jewels that weren't really doing that much, but were doing something, have just been disabled. So, for example, Freezing Pulse, talked about here, no longer has a threshold jewel. It's just getting its damage increased. So you do have to get those extra projectiles through LMP or GMP or extra proj on your gear or something like that, which is really not putting this in a good light. Honestly, threshold jewel change, in my opinion, is not great at all. It's terrible, but we'll move on from there. We'll talk about Unleash now. Number 6, lower the power of the Unleashed support. Because it is the single most impactful support for the kind of build that benefits from aforementioned buffs, creates limited options for these builds by feeling like the only option, as I stated before. With these builds otherwise being buffed, there should be more build options available than before. So if everything's being buffed for, you know, around 45%, then we'll see what Unleash is actually doing here in terms of its nerfs. So supported skills now deal 50% less damage when reoccurring at gem level 1, previously 30, and 41% at gem level 20, previously 21. If we consider Unleash casting, let's say, 5 times, so you're dealing 41% less, but then you're dealing it 5 times. Overall, I know the math is a little bit interesting, I'm not going to whip up the math right now, but overall, Unleash is still going to be better than what it was before, but it's not going to be as good as probably just another damage modifier while you're self-casting right here. Unleash is going to be a little bit niche in things like Archmage still and all that kind of stuff, but it's not just going to be the best thing to do with a lot of skills. Alright, let's move on. Next, lower the damage from Totem, Trap, Mine, and Trigger effects to balance out the buff to these spells. The intention is that in general, these builds should deal the same damage at high levels as they did previously. While at face value these changes will look like nerfs, for the most part they shouldn't be due to the buffs to spells. However, we do acknowledge that there will be a small number of builds that will be negatively affected by these changes. Additionally, because we've adjusted some support gems that multiply the number of traps thrown, we've provided some compensation on this non-cooldown trap skills like Fire Trap and Lightning Trap. It's really good that they're acknowledging that even though they're trying to keep everything the same in terms of traps and mine damage, that there may be some skills that will be affected and will be, you know, nerfed in this regard. I think that that's a really, really nice kind of foresight from Path of Exile, from GGG right there. We're not going to go into all the numbers, but you can generally think that most of your mine and trap builds will have relatively the same damage. They might be a little less, but don't worry too much. If you just look at the numbers of Totem, Trap, Mine, and Trigger effects of their damage, you're going to be scared, but remember all of the buffs that's coming through to the base skills themselves. Alright, lower the damage of Player Ignite by 28% to partially offset the damage increase that many Ignite applying spells have received. For the majority of high-level spell gems, this is a slight damage buff when combined with the above changes. Burning Arrow, Armageddon Brand, Explosive Arrow, and several other skills have received changes to compensate for the lower damage of Ignite. Attack skills and a small number of spells that are not typically aligned with Ignites will have weaker Ignites as a result of this change. We plan to introduce a mechanic for Ignite damage with melee attack skills to give some unconventional Ignite builds a new option for enhancing Ignites. So Ignites I think are still in a very good spot. I got baited, as you might remember, last patch going, oh, Discharge Ignite's back, it's going to be great. It turned out very shit, but there are still a lot of Ignite skills. For example, Fireball is getting a massive buff from 1,643 damage to 2,460 damage on the top end, with now an effectiveness of 370% instead of 240%. Fireball is now going to be so insanely strong for Ignite, and something like Flame Blast as well is going to be so good for Ignite. These are still going to be really strong contenders for initial starting builds, and though I keep getting baited into Ignite, I am now thinking of starting Ignite again with a Fireball Flame Blast character that will just carry me through mapping. But we'll have to see what mapping looks like, won't we? So that's pretty much everything in the first section here of the hit-based spellcasting. Now we're going to be talking about hit-based bow attacks. Alright, let's get into it. Problem: hit-based bow attacks require an unreasonable amount of investment to reach competitive levels of damage. Builds that want to achieve this must utilize critical strikes, and many skills can't sufficiently invest in this mechanic without sacrificing defensive options. So the solutions: give bows the same local added elemental damage modifiers as two-handed melee weapons do, which are much stronger than the bow-specific modifiers used previously. Improve the damage of bows in general, with some base types getting up to 50% more base damage than before, and improve the mastery options on bow passive clusters. Make a number of improvements to quivers so that bows can receive much more damage from rear quivers, reworking the quiver progression with new quiver types to provide a diverse set of useful implicits, greatly improved added physical damage modifiers on quivers, replaced elemental damage with attack skills modifiers with increased damage with bow skills to allow quivers to roll another way to improve skills dealing physical or chaos damage, taken away the +1 arrow prefix off influence quiver modifiers and added it to the core modifier pool of quivers as a suffix. We've added the extra tier of attack speed and accuracy modifiers on quivers. Holy moly, bows might actually be some of the fastest leveling now. It's going to take a little bit for me to completely get my head around all of this, and someone smarter or better than me is going to be able to do so, but not only for the end game, bows now may be a little bit overtuned for the early game as well, which may make leveling a bow build on a new league actually quite good. We'll have to wait and see with this. Now, bow builds, as stated before, have been notoriously bad without investment. I'm just a little bit scared with the same investment that bow builds used to have, say for example like a crazy ice shot build with like a couple of mirrors investment in Scourge League is probably going to be like maybe double the damage of what it is now, which is potentially going to mean that the high-end DPS softcore builds are just going to all be bow builds now. We'll have to see, but there's a lot of interesting changes here in the specifics here. So if you want to jump into that, you can jump into the specifics right there. All right, let's move on. Sources of added damage. Problem: added cold, lightning, and chaos damage support gems provide significant unconditional added damage that outclasses many damage options available to some builds, most notably bow builds. By comparison, many other sources of added damage are relatively weak. So the solution was to lower the strength of the unconditional added damage support gems and raise the strength of local added damage and added damage to spells on weapons. So this is a little bit of a nerf to bow builds, but as you can see here, the damage decrease of the added damage supports isn't that much. The awakened ones are a little bit, but it's like, it's less than 30 flat damage on most of them, which is pretty interesting. But all of the local added damage weapon mod changes are quite a large increase. As you can read through all of this if you would like to, and some spell added damage as well. All right, let's move on. Skill interactions with Hydrosphere. Spoiler alert, Hydrosphere is now dead. Problem: certain skills that have had a chaining or shockwave effect can multiply their damage against single targets by also hitting Hydrosphere. There are certain builds out there that at the moment, prior to this patch, can basically double their damage when using Hydrosphere to chain off with. That's basically what this is referring to. These skills should not be balanced around using an off-class or off-theme skill like this. Maintaining the ability to use this interaction would prevent us from improving certain bow skills and hit damage spells without their maximum damage output being too high. So the solution, destroy Hydrosphere and put it in the garbage. No, wait, what did they say? Change Hydrosphere to have a 1-second cooldown before it can be hit again. This maintains the ailment mechanic on Hydrosphere to still allow for some special skill interactions, but it is no longer such a significant single target damage multiplier for so many skills. I think this is a great change. I completely agree that Hydrosphere was just not in the place that it should be thematically for the skill, and just using Hydrosphere in basically anything that would hit Hydrosphere and Shockwave off it, or chain off Hydrosphere and hit the boss again. It was stupid. It was dumb. It was cool sometimes to see the crazy damage that you could get from that, and seeing that discovered by the likes of, you know, Captain Lance and a bunch of other people as well. Shout out to Captain Lance. He's an awesome guy. Go sub to Captain Lance on Twitch. Yeah, it's a really cool mechanic. A cool mechanic that does not work with Path of Exile thematically and Hydrosphere thematically, so I like the changes. Although they've forgotten about Tornado, which is still super strong, but let's not talk about Tornado. You guys enjoy Tornado in the next league. Triggering marks. Problem. When applied through mark on hit skills or unique items that trigger them, marks are far more efficient for clearing and are easier to sustain on boss fights. Builds that don't have access to these high-end items are disadvantaged in comparison. Solution. Make marks permanent so that they only require a single cast for boss encounters. Add a new support gem that lets attacks trigger marks on hitting rare or unique targets. So, to get your head around this, basically, this is saying that marks can be really efficient for clearing and easier to sustain on boss fights when they are applied for mark on hit skills. So marks are permanent now, so when you apply it to a mob, it's on there forever. But there's also a new support gem that allows attacks to trigger marks on hitting rares and unique targets, which is interesting. So they're now permanent. They no longer have a duration tag. Added a new dexterity support gem, mark on hit. Trigger supported mark when you hit a rare or unique enemy with an attack. Only an attack here, which, you know, makes sense because it's a trigger. This support adds a cooldown and a small curse effect penalty to the triggered mark skill, but it does not need to be linked to the triggering attack. The Deadeye Focal Point Ascendancy passive skill no longer has mark to inflict and not remove from dying enemies. Instead, it has your mark transfers to another enemy when marked enemy dies. Very strong, honestly, right here. That one right there is really cool for, especially for something like, what is it? Sniper's Mark. Really strong. That's just the rubbish truck, if you can hear him out there. They're picking up the rubbish. Thanks, Mr. Rubbish Man. He's doing a good job. Everyone right now give a thumbs up to your Rubbish Man. Big old thumbs up to your Rubbish Man. What a great guy. Alright. The influence modifiers that trigger a mark when you hit a rare or unique enemy have been removed from the modifier pool, so they can no longer be obtained. This is the big kicker right here. Assassin's Mark on hit, Poacher's Mark on hit. What are the other ones that people usually... Those are kind of the only ones that people like, but they can't be obtained. You're pretty much only getting Curse on hit instead of... Hex on hit instead of Mark on hit, right? Alright, let's move on. Fortification and damage reduction. This is an interesting one right here. Problem. Fortification gain being scaled by the damage dealt by a fortifying hit means that hitting monsters with very high amounts of damage reduction, such as in the Azurite Mine, the Simulacrum, or against monsters that have just been spawned by certain league mechanics, can grant little to no fortification, even for builds with very high damage. So the solution, fortification generation now ignores the target's damage reduction. Now, although this is a buff to things like, you know, being in the Azurite Mine and Simulacrum, it's also a buff overall to Fortify. It means that Fortify is just going to be stronger in almost every edge case, apart from maybe hitting white mobs. Because most mobs, you know, blue, rares, especially uniques, they've got some sort of damage reduction on them. You know, so this is just basically a buff to Fortify. It's good. I don't know if Fortify is going to be at the forefront of, you know, damage reduction build meta, but it's still good. The interesting thing that I will just point out, spell suppression is not getting hit at all, as far as we can see in the manifesto, so enjoy your spell suppression, everyone. Alright, skill balance, detonate dead. The problem was that detonate builds can gain significantly more damage by diluting the pool of desecratable monsters with high life specters. Because of how desecrate selected monsters, the fewer monsters occurring in the area, the more damage detonate dead dealt. So the solution was to change desecrate to have a fixed chance to spawn a specter corpse. This means detonate dead's damage should be more consistent based on which area in the game you are in. This also means there is no incentive to bring multiple different High Life Spectre varieties, although you still benefit from bringing one High Life Spectre into areas. I feel partially responsible for this, although everyone's, saying Darky is pretty responsible. I, as far as I can tell, discovered this mechanic about a year and a half ago, maybe even, actually it was probably closer to 2 years ago, doing some experiments, and basically I'll link a video below of me actually discovering this. At the time, I couldn't find anyone that had discovered that bringing multiple different High Life Spectres actually increases your detonate dead damage. Very high chance that some people still knew about it all the way back then, but since then it's kind of snowballed into the desecrate and detonate dead meta, and now that's being taken out. So long to all of that. Yeah, but I'll put the video down below. But anyway, the specifics are that desecrate and corpse walk now have a static 15% chance to spawn a spectre corpse rather than a 2 times relative weighting compared to all other possible corpse types. So I think this has been confirmed that this is a 15% chance per corpse, I think Ziz said on Twitter. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 15% per corpse spawned to spawn a spectre corpse. Alright, problem. Seismic Trap has a very high damage scaling, as its damage scales with increases to area of effect. Increasing the area of Seismic Trap impacts greatly increases the chance of multiple large bursts hitting a target, as area increases don't affect the area where the impacts can occur. Though this mechanic is interesting, it provides too much damage for the investment costs, and the damage of the skill would have to be lowered by so much to offset this, that the skill would be very weak without the overlapping mechanic. So they've made modifiers to area of effect apply to this area Seismic Trap's burst can target at a ratio. This will slightly improve the area coverage of the skill while lowering the damage growth from the increases of area effect without removing their damage benefit entirely. So this is a nerf to Seismic Trap, but honestly, I think it's still going to be good. It's just not going to be S+ tier. Another problem, Toxic Rain has been very strong damage over time and a low build cost compared to other bow builds. It also benefits from some of the quiver and mastery changes made to improve hit-based bow skills. So the solution was to reduce the high level damage of Toxic Rain in order to partially negate the improvements to quivers and bring it more in line with other skills. So in terms of, partially negating that, it's getting around about a, I don't know what you'd call it, like a 15% damage nerf on the top end right here at gem level 20, which, Toxic Rain is all about scaling, so that's going to scale in the negative direction the more that you get gem levels there as well. Alright, some unique item balance. Problem, March of the Legion is a very low cost method to gain 4 extra auras on some builds due to the change where mana is not being required in order to cast an aura. It also took full advantage of the Supreme Ego Keystone in a way that goes against the intent of the mechanic and gained a significant amount of power in the process. Solution is to rework the blessing mechanic of March of the Legion to limit the number of blessings you can have to 1. Change the skill to cost mana instead of temporarily reserving mana. The process of making this change also highlighted a number of problems with other mechanics, which has led to a ripple effect of other changes being required. Release a blessing as a support gem to make the mechanic available to builds that are not using the unique item. This is intended to be useful for high mana use characters who wish to leave their mana unreserved for characters using Blood Magic Keystone. Improve the aura level granted by March of the Legion so the item excels at using a blessing aura. Remove Mortal Conviction and the life passives from behind Blood Magic Keystone and make a Mortal Conviction style support gem that makes an aura free and prevents you from reserving mana. It will be mutually exclusive with blessing skills, so you won't have to use both simultaneously. This support gem provides slightly less aura effect to the skill than the blessing support, but also has no cost or upkeep involved. Very interesting. Change Blood Magic to also grant 10% more life to compensate for the removal of the efficient life passive behind the keystone. Wow. Change Supreme Ego to not limit you to 1 aura and instead give more aura effect based on how much mana an aura reserves. The full values of all these changes will be available in the patch notes. Massive changes coming to how Mortal Conviction, Blood Magic, Supreme Ego, all of that kind of stuff works. So this is going to be really, really interesting to see how all of this plays out. But yeah, the Jung Rowan March of the Legion abusing at the start of League. Sorry, dude. That's gone. That's gone. Problem. The Shade Form skill, granted by the Shroud of the Lightless and Replica Eternity Shroud unique items, could, with heavy investment, have its duration extended to be longer than its cooldown, granting permanent immunity to physical damage. I did not know this existed, honestly, but it's glad that they've caught wind of it and that they are out nerfing it. So they're changing Shade Form's cooldown to pause while the skill is active and reduce the cooldown from 45 seconds to 40 seconds. So this probably means it's almost impossible to get it pseudo-immune to physical damage at all times, but people like to try and abuse stuff, so we'll see what happens. Problem: the damage reduction granted by the Strength of Blood keystone from the Lethal Pride unique jewel incorrectly scaled with modifiers to life recovery rate, allowing it to reach 100% and for characters to be immune to damage. I also didn't know that. Strength of Blood's damage reduction no longer scales with modifiers to life recovery rate. I did not know that either. These kind of bug changes in the manifesto here, great to see that they're catching wind of all of this. Now, we've seen a teaser of the Dancing Dervish, but this is really interesting to read more about it. The Dancing Dervish unique item now has no accessible way to sustain its mechanic on boss fights, mostly due to rampage stacks being difficult to activate in these fights, and the summon minion's behavior feeling sluggish while clearing. So solution was to change the Dancing Dervish to cause you to gain rampage on melee hits and improve its minion behavior. So this means that once Dancing Dervish is, going and doing its thing, you can actually just use your fist to punch some enemies and get some more rampage stacks, or keep your rampage stacks up. So the Dancing Dervish's Rampage modifier has been replaced with melee hits count as Rampage kills, allowing players to easily build up a new Rampage streak without having to kill monsters. This stat will not affect you while rampaging, as Dancing Dervish disables itself on Rampage, but the existing behavior where the minion generates Rampage kills on unique hits is still present. The minions summoned by the Dancing Dervish now use the new channeled version of Cyclone. Their movement speed and AI have been adjusted to feel more proactive while clearing. That's really, really nice. So hopefully the AI is going to be a lot better on this. This could be a really, really strong build now. We'll have to wait and see, but it could be super strong. Alright, problem. Fortify's Dread Banner Fortification Duration mod was causing issues with the new fortification system that could not be reconciled. So the solution: replace Fortify's Dread Banner mod. Fortify no longer has Dread Banner has 100 to 200% increased fortification duration. Instead, it now has Dread Banner grants an additional +2 to 4 maximum fortification when placing the banner. This change affects existing items. Problem: Void Fletcher outclasses rare quivers for many builds. Solution was to review the damage of the Void Fletcher arrows. This balance is being reviewed in comparison with all other changes to rare quivers, so specifics will be included in the patch notes when confirmed. That is it with the patch notes right there. Not the patch notes, sorry, the Balance Manifesto. Patch notes are coming soon, hopefully TM. I don't know when they're coming, but they're coming soon. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite or least favorite thing is about this Balance Manifesto. For me, as I stated, the Threshold Jewels are my least favorite, and my most favorite are definitely the hit-based spellcasting. I'm most likely going to be playing a hit-based spellcaster on League Start, and it's probably going to be Ignite. I don't want to keep baiting myself into Ignite, but I'm really going to be looking at the numbers here. I want to play something that's going to be really strong in the meta. So if it's not looking like it's going to be S tier, I will play something else and have a lot of fun just zooming through content. And you can catch me live on Twitch at twitch.tv/thisisbadger. We're going to be streaming a lot with the new Path of Exile League. We're going to be blasting through, and it's going to be super fun. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this long form video about the Balance Manifesto. Links down below for everything I talked about. And until next time, Badger is out.